The dust from the morning roundup still hung in the Arizona air when Maria Esperanza rode up to the Double Bar W ranch office. She'd been practicing her approach for weeks, rehearsing the words in both English and Spanish, knowing she'd need to be perfect if she wanted even a chance. Ranch foreman Buck Williams barely looked up from his ledger when she knocked on the wooden doorframe. Behind him, 3 other ranch hands, Tommy, Dale, and Red, stopped their conversation to stare. "Mr. Williams, I'd like to register for the barrel racing competition." Buck's pencil stopped moving. Slowly, he raised his head, taking in Maria's determined expression, her calloused hands that spoke of years working horses. "Competitions for ranch employees only," Buck said flatly, his gray eyes cold. "And we don't hire your kind here." The words hit Maria like a slap, but she kept her voice steady. "I work the Hernandez spread just south of here. Been breaking horses since I was 12. "Don't matter what your daddy taught you," Tommy chimed in from behind Buck's desk. "This here's a white man's competition. Always has been." Maria felt heat rise in her cheeks, but she held her ground. The flyer in town didn't say anything about who could enter, just said best riders in the county. Buck leaned back in his chair, a cruel smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Well now, little lady, there's what the flyer says, and there's what we mean. This is serious business, prize money, betting, reputation. I can outride any man on this ranch," Maria said quietly, the words carrying more weight than if she'd shouted them. The room erupted in laughter. Red slapped his knee, nearly spilling his coffee. "You hear that, boys? Little senorita thinks she can show us how it's done. Why don't you run on home and leave the real riding to the men?" Dale added, his voice dripping with contempt. Maria stood there for a long moment, letting their laughter wash over her like a poisonous tide. These were the men who controlled opportunity in this part of Arizona, who decided who belonged and who didn't. "The competition is open to the public," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper but carrying steel. "I checked with Sheriff Martinez in town." Buck's smile faded. "Sheriff Martinez, huh? Well, maybe he forgot to mention that this is private property. My property. And I decide who's welcome here. You can register in town if you want," Tommy said with a shrug. "But good luck finding someone willing to let a Mexican girl make a fool of herself." Maria felt something cold settle in her stomach. She'd expected resistance, but this level of hatred surprised her. These men didn't just think she was inferior, they seemed to hate her for even trying. "I'll be there," she said simply, "with or without your permission." Buck stood up slowly, towering over Maria's small frame, but she didn't step back. "Now you listen here, girl. You might have some legal right to enter, but that doesn't mean you belong. This competition means something to the folks around here." "It's not political for me," Maria replied. "It's just riding." "Just riding," Red scoffed. "Like you could handle a real horse in a real competition." Maria thought of Cielo, her paint horse waiting outside, 15 hands of pure speed and intelligence, trained with patience and love, rather than the harsh methods these men preferred. "Guess we'll find out," she said. Buck walked around his desk, stopping just inches from Maria. She could smell the whiskey on his breath, see the veins in his weathered face. "You show up here causing trouble, and there'll be consequences," he said quietly. "For you and your family. This county has ways of dealing with folks who don't know their place." The threat hung in the air like smoke from a branding iron. Maria felt fear creep up her spine, but she also felt something else, a burning determination that had been building her entire life. "I know my place," she said, meeting Buck's glare without flinching. "It's on horseback." She turned and walked out of the office, feeling their eyes on her back like brands. Outside, Cielo nickered softly, sensing her distress. Maria stroked the horse's neck, drawing comfort from the familiar warmth. "Looks like it's going to be harder than we thought, girl," she whispered. "But we didn't come this far to back down now." As she mounted up and rode away from the Double Bar W, Maria could hear laughter drifting from the office behind her. But underneath that laughter, she heard something else. Uncertainty. For all their bluster and threats, these men were worried. That fear, Maria realized, was the first crack in the wall she was determined to break down. Maria's father, Diego Esperanza, was shoeing a horse when she returned to their small ranch, his weathered hands steady despite his 63 years. He looked up as she dismounted, reading the story in her posture. "They said no," he said. It wasn't a question. "They said worse than no," Maria replied, leading Cielo toward the barn. "But I'm entering anyway. Sheriff Martinez confirmed it. The competition is open to anyone who can pay the entry fee." Diego set down his hammer and studied his daughter's face. "Mija, sometimes the legal right to do something and the wisdom of doing it are different things. You think I should give up? Just accept that people like us don't get to compete?" "I think," Diego said carefully, "that you need to understand what you're walking into. This isn't just about proving you can ride." Maria had heard this argument before, from her mother, from neighbors, from well-meaning friends. But she'd also heard other stories, about her grandfather who'd been one of the finest vaqueros in Sonora before the border moved around him. "Abuelo never backed down from a challenge," Maria said, beginning to unsaddle Cielo. "And it nearly got him killed," Diego replied. "But yes, he made the ride, and yes, he earned enough money to buy this land we're standing on." They worked in comfortable silence for a while, Diego returning to his shoeing while Maria groomed Cielo with long, methodical strokes. "Tell me about the course," Diego said finally. Maria smiled. This was her father's way of saying he supported her. 3 barrels in a cloverleaf pattern, standard spacing, 90 feet between the first and second barrel, 105 feet to the third. "And the competition?" "Buck Williams rides a big bay gelding, fast but clumsy in the turns. Tommy Morrison has that sorrel mare. She's quick but spooks at crowd noise. Dale Patterson rides his father's old roping horse, steady but not particularly fast." Diego nodded approvingly. "You've been watching them?" "Every Sunday after church when they practice behind the saloon. They're good riders, but they ride like men, all power and force." Maria paused in her grooming. "They don't understand that barrel racing is about partnership." "And you trust Cielo?" Maria looked into her horse's intelligent eyes, seeing the partnership they'd built over 5 years of patient work. "With my life." That evening, Maria and her father set up barrels in their small arena, using feed sacks filled with sand when they ran out of proper equipment. By lamplight, they worked on the pattern, timing each run with Diego's old pocket watch. "Your first barrel is too wide," Diego called after one run. "You're giving up time for safety. If I take it tighter, I risk knocking it over. If you knock it over, you lose. If you play it safe, you also lose. These men will be going all out. You need to go beyond all out." They practiced until nearly midnight, Cielo responding to increasingly subtle cues, Maria learning to trust her horse's judgment about distances and angles. "There's something else we need to talk about," Diego said as they walked back to the house. "The threats." Maria had been waiting for this conversation. "Buck Williams said there would be consequences if I caused trouble. Buck Williams is a man who's used to getting his way. If he decides to make life difficult for us, are you saying I should back down?" Diego stopped walking and turned to face his daughter. In the moonlight, she could see the pride and worry warring in his expression. "I'm saying you need to be prepared for what comes after. Win or lose, everything changes once you step into that arena. You won't just be Maria Esperanza anymore. You'll be a symbol." "Papa," she said as they reached the porch, "what would Abuelo do?" Diego smiled, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him all day. "Your grandfather would ride into that arena like he owned it, give everyone something they'd never forget, and then tip his hat as he rode away with the prize money. Then that's what I'll do." "Mija," Diego said softly, "your grandfather was a man in a time when that meant something. You're a woman in a time when that means you have to be twice as good to get half the respect." "Then I'll be twice as good," Maria said simply. Word of Maria's intention to compete spread through desert wells like wildfire through dry grass. By the next morning, the entire county seemed to have chosen sides, and the division ran deeper than anyone had expected. At Henderson's General Store, Maria's mother, Carmen, found herself facing cold stares and whispered conversations that stopped abruptly when she approached. Mrs. Henderson, who had always been friendly, now barely acknowledged her presence. "I need flour and sugar," Carmen said quietly, setting her money on the counter. Mrs. Henderson counted out the coins with exaggerated care. "That'll be $2.15, she said, though the same order had cost $1.90 the week before. Carmen paid without comment, but the message was clear. Supporting Maria would cost the family in ways they hadn't anticipated. Meanwhile, at the Mexican quarter of town, a different conversation was taking place. In the small cantina where vaqueros and railroad workers gathered, Maria's decision was being debated with passionate intensity. "The girl has courage," said old Miguel Santos, who'd known Maria since she was a child. "But courage and wisdom are not the same thing. She's representing all of us now," argued Juan Morales, a young railroad worker. "If she backs down, it's like saying we accept their judgment that we're not good enough. And if she goes and gets humiliated, what then?" Miguel shot back. "These gringos will use it as proof that we don't belong." But not everyone was hostile to Maria's participation. Sarah Montgomery, the schoolteacher, had been quietly spreading support among the town's women, many of whom faced their own barriers in a male-dominated society. "I don't care what color she is," declared Martha Jenkins, the doctor's wife. "Any woman brave enough to challenge those arrogant cowboys has my support. But it's not proper," worried Elizabeth Patterson, Dale's wife. "Barrel racing is dangerous. What if she gets hurt?" "Then she gets back up and tries again," Sarah said firmly. "Same as any man would." The tension reached a boiling point 3 days before the competition when Maria rode into town to register officially and pay her entry fee. A crowd had gathered outside the sheriff's office, and she could feel the weight of dozens of eyes as she dismounted. Sheriff Martinez, a weathered man in his 50s who'd been keeping the peace in Desert Wells for over a decade, met her at the door. His expression was carefully neutral. "Miss Esperanza," he said formally, "I assume you're here to register for the barrel racing competition." "Yes, sir, I have the $5 entry fee. Before we proceed, I need to make sure you understand the situation. I've had 3 men demand I find a way to bar you from competing. I've also had 2 others threaten to withdraw if you're allowed to participate." Maria felt her stomach tighten, but she kept her voice steady. "And what did you tell them?" "I told them the same thing I'm telling you. The law is the law. The competition was advertised as open to the public, and as long as you meet the requirements and pay the fee, you have every right to participate." "But," Maria could hear the unspoken reservation in his voice. Sheriff Martinez glanced around at the crowd, then stepped closer, lowering his voice. "But I can't guarantee your safety once you're in that arena. Feelings are running high. Are you advising me not to compete?" The sheriff studied her face for a long moment. "I'm advising you to be very, very careful, and to make sure you have friends watching your back." Maria handed over her entry fee, and Sheriff Martinez wrote her name in the official registry with deliberate care. As ink dried on paper, making her participation official, the crowd outside began to buzz with renewed energy. "It's done," someone called out. "She's really going to do it." Walking back to her horse, Maria felt the weight of history settling on her shoulders. This was no longer just about proving she could ride. It had become a test of everything the community believed about itself. As she mounted Cielo and prepared to ride home, a voice called out from the crowd. "You sure you want to do this, señorita? A lot of folks think you're in over your head." Maria turned to see who had spoken, but the speaker had melted back into the crowd. Instead of anger, she felt a strange sense of calm descend over her. All her life, people had been telling her what she couldn't do, where she didn't belong. "Come on, Cielo," she said softly, turning her horse toward home. "Time to show them what we're made of." Competition day dawned clear and hot, with the kind of Arizona sky that stretched endlessly blue from horizon to horizon. Maria woke before sunrise, but today felt different, charged with possibility and danger. The arena behind Connolly's saloon had been transformed overnight. Wooden bleachers flanked both sides of the riding area, and colorful bunting hung from posts. Someone had even brought in fresh sand for the track, creating professional conditions. By 9 in the morning, wagons and horses were arriving from ranches throughout the county. Maria watched from across the street as the Double Bar W crew set up their area, Buck Williams barking orders while Tommy and Dale prepared their horses with nervous energy. "Big crowd," observed Carlos, Maria's younger brother, who'd insisted on coming despite their parents' concerns about potential trouble. Maria nodded, estimating at least 200 people had already gathered, with more arriving every few minutes. She recognized faces from town, but many were strangers. Word had apparently spread beyond Desert Wells. "Look there," Carlos said, pointing toward the far end of the arena. "That's the newspaper man from Phoenix." Maria felt her stomach tighten. A reporter meant this story would travel far beyond their small community. "Miss Esperanza?" A woman's voice made Maria turn. Sarah Montgomery, the schoolteacher, approached with a small group of other women from town. "We wanted you to know that not everyone hopes you'll fail today." "Thank you," Maria said, touched by the gesture but also aware of how it further divided the community. "You just ride your best," added Martha Jenkins. "Show them what real horsemanship looks like." As the women walked away, Maria noticed Buck Williams watching the interaction from across the street, his expression dark. The first event was scheduled for 10 o'clock, a traditional roping competition that would warm up the crowd. Maria used this time to walk Cielo around the arena perimeter, letting her horse get accustomed to the noise and excitement. The paint mare was alert but calm. "She looks ready," said a familiar voice behind her. Maria turned to see an elderly Mexican man she didn't recognize, his weathered face kind but serious. He wore the clothes of a working vaquero, but carried himself with quiet dignity. "I'm Roberto Vasquez," he said. "I knew your grandfather." Maria's breath caught. Roberto Vasquez was a legend, one of the finest horsemen in Sonora. "He told me about you," Roberto continued. "Said you had the gift, the connection with horses that can't be taught, only recognized." "I'm honored, senor." "Today is not just about winning," Roberto said quietly. "Today is about showing them that skill and heart matter more than the color of your skin. Your grandfather would be proud." The barrel racing competition began at noon, with 5 competitors total. The running order had been drawn at random, with Maria scheduled to go fourth, after Buck, Tommy, and Dale, but before Red Hutchins. Buck Williams went first, riding his big bay gelding with aggressive confidence. His time was solid, 18.43 seconds, but Maria could see places where precision could have gained precious tenths of seconds. Tommy Morrison's run was cleaner, his sorrel mare responding well to his directions. But as Maria had predicted, the crowd noise spooked the horse slightly at the second barrel, causing a wide turn that cost valuable time. Still, his 18:21 was the best so far. Dale Patterson played it safe, taking wide turns and focusing on not knocking over barrels. His time of 19:15 was respectable but not competitive. As her turn approached, Maria could feel the tension in the crowd shift. Conversations quieted, and she was aware of hundreds of pairs of eyes following her every movement as she mounted Cielo and rode toward the starting line. "Ladies and gentlemen," called out the announcer, "our next competitor is Miss Maria Esperanza, riding Cielo." The formal introduction sent a ripple through the crowd, some applause but also scattered boos and catcalls. Maria blocked out the noise, focusing entirely on her horse and the course ahead. At the starting line, she took a deep breath and leaned forward slightly, feeling Cielo gather herself beneath her. This was the moment everything had been building toward. "Ready when you are, miss," called the timekeeper. Maria looked ahead at the 3 barrels, then down at Cielo's ears, perfectly positioned and alert. In the space of a heartbeat, all the noise and pressure faded away. "Now, Cielo," she whispered, and they exploded forward into their destiny. The starting line disappeared beneath Cielo's hooves as horse and rider moved as a single entity toward the first barrel. Maria felt the familiar rush of speed and power, but underneath it was something deeper, a perfect harmony that made every stride feel effortless. The first barrel approached faster than it ever had in practice, but Maria didn't flinch. At exactly the right moment, she shifted her weight and applied subtle pressure with her left leg. Cielo responded instantly, diving into the turn with mathematical precision. The crowd's noise faded to a distant murmur as they thundered toward the second barrel. This was the technical turn, the one that separated good riders from great ones. Too wide and you lost time, too tight and you risked a collision. Maria felt Cielo's muscles bunch and release beneath her as they approached the barrel at a seemingly impossible angle. At the last possible second, the paint mare shifted her weight and carved around the obstacle with grace that made it look effortless. They were so close that Maria's boot actually brushed the barrel, but it remained standing. Now came the final sprint to the third barrel. This was where power mattered as much as precision, where Cielo's quarter-horse breeding and years of conditioning would either carry them to victory or fall short. The paint mare stretched out into a full gallop, her hooves barely seeming to touch the ground. Maria could feel the raw speed building beneath her, could see the third barrel growing larger with each stride. The timing had to be perfect. Maria waited, trusting Cielo's judgment, feeling for the exact moment when the horse would signal her readiness to turn. It came like a whisper, a subtle shift in balance that only someone completely in tune with their mount would recognize. They went into the final turn at what felt like the speed of light, Cielo's body nearly horizontal as she carved around the barrel. For an instant, Maria thought they might have cut it too close, but the barrel held, and they were racing toward the finish line with nothing but open ground ahead. The crowd erupted as they crossed the finish line, but Maria barely heard it. She was focused on bringing Cielo down from the full gallop safely. "Time!" called the announcer, his voice carrying clearly across the sudden hush. 17 94 seconds. The silence that followed was deafening. Maria looked toward the timer's stand, wondering if she'd heard correctly. 17 94 seconds, more than a quarter second faster than Tommy Morrison's leading time. Then the crowd exploded. The Mexican section of the bleachers erupted in cheers and applause, while the Anglo side seemed split between grudging appreciation and stunned silence. As Maria rode Cielo back toward the starting area, she caught sight of Buck Williams' face. The ranch foreman looked like he'd been struck by lightning, his usual confident expression replaced by something approaching panic. "That was some riding, miss," said the timekeeper, an elderly man who'd been running competitions for 30 years. "Never seen a cleaner run on this course." "Thank you," Maria managed, still not quite believing what had happened. But the competition wasn't over yet. Red Hutchins still had to run, and his new Texas quarter horse was an unknown quantity. As Red prepared for his turn, Maria could see the pressure written on his face. He was no longer just trying to win a local competition. Red's run was aggressive to the point of recklessness. His horse was indeed fast, but the rider's desperation showed in every turn. He took risks that Maria would never have attempted, pushing his mount beyond its comfort zone. At the second barrel, his gamble nearly paid off. The horse made an incredible turn, tighter than anything Maria had managed, and for a moment it looked like Red might actually do it. But at the third barrel, his luck ran out. Coming into the turn too fast and at the wrong angle, Red's horse clipped the barrel with its shoulder. The barrel wobbled, tilted, and crashed to the ground in a cloud of dust, bringing with it a 5-second penalty that eliminated any chance of victory. Red's final time was announced as 23.67 seconds, and with it, Maria Esperanza became the official winner of the Desert Wells barrel racing competition. The award ceremony was awkward. Maria rode Cielo to the center of the arena to accept her prize, $50 in cash and a silver belt buckle. The applause was scattered and uncertain. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer called out, "your Desert Wells barrel racing champion, Miss Maria Esperanza." As she held the buckle high, Maria looked out at the crowd and saw a dozen different reactions. Pride on the faces of her family and supporters, anger and disbelief from Buck Williams and his allies. But what struck her most was the sight of several young Mexican girls who had pressed forward to the arena fence, their eyes wide with wonder as they watched someone who looked like them claiming victory. In that moment, Maria understood that her victory was about more than prize money or personal satisfaction. It was about possibility, about showing an entire generation that barriers could be broken by skill, determination, and courage. As she rode out of the arena, Maria felt the weight of what she'd accomplished settling over her. She'd done more than win a competition. She'd opened a door that had been locked for generations. The celebration at the Esperanza Ranch that evening was subdued, despite the magnitude of Maria's achievement. While her family was proud beyond words, they also understood that her victory had fundamentally changed their position in the community. "The prize money will help," Diego said as they sat around the kitchen table, the silver buckle gleaming in the lamplight. "But money won't protect us from what comes next." He was right to be concerned. Even as they spoke, wagons were pulling away from stores, their owners having been advised that their business was no longer welcome. 3 Mexican families who worked as seasonal laborers had been told their services wouldn't be needed. "They're punishing everyone because of what I did," Maria said quietly. "No, mija," her mother corrected firmly. "They're showing their true colors because you forced them to." The difference became clearer over the following days as the community's reaction sorted itself into predictable patterns. The Mexican quarter rallied around Maria's victory, treating her like a hero. But in the Anglo part of town, her win was being reframed as either a fluke or evidence of cheating. "I heard her horse was doped," someone claimed at Henderson's store. "Probably had that saddle specially weighted," suggested another. Buck Williams was spreading the most damaging rumor of all, that the competition had been fixed, that Sheriff Martinez had somehow influenced the timing. It was nonsense, but it was the kind that people wanted to believe. The backlash was swift. Diego lost 2 major horse training contracts within a week. Carmen found herself unwelcome in stores where she'd shopped for years. Carlos was jumped by 3 older boys after school, though he gave better than he got. But there were also unexpected allies. Sarah Montgomery organized a group of women to publicly congratulate Maria. Dr. Jenkins hired Diego to train a new horse, making it clear that he judged men by their skill rather than their ancestry. Most surprising of all was the letter that arrived a week after the competition, postmarked from Phoenix and bearing the letterhead of the Arizona Territorial Government. "Dear Miss Esperanza," Maria read aloud to her family, "I was in attendance at the Desert Wells competition and witnessed your remarkable victory. I am writing to invite you to compete in the Territorial Championship Barrel Racing competition to be held in Phoenix next month." The letter was signed by James Harrison, Territorial Commissioner of Athletics, and it represented an opportunity that Maria had never dared to dream of. "Phoenix," Carlos breathed. "The Territorial Championship." "It's a trap," Diego said immediately. "They want to get you on neutral ground where they can ensure you lose." "Maybe," Maria agreed. "But what if it isn't? What if this is the chance to prove that what happened here wasn't a fluke?" The decision was made for her when Buck Williams rode up to the Esperanza Ranch 3 days later. He looked older somehow, his confidence shaken. "Miss Esperanza," he said formally, "I've come to make you an offer. I'm listening. Don't go to Phoenix, stay here, keep quiet about what happened, and I'll make sure your family isn't bothered anymore." Maria felt her anger rising, but she kept her voice level. "And if I do go to Phoenix?" Buck's mask slipped slightly, revealing the desperation underneath. "Then I can't guarantee what happens to your family while you're gone." "Are you threatening us, Mr. Williams?" "I'm offering you a choice." Maria looked at this man who had spent his entire life believing that power gave him the right to control other people's destinies. For the first time since she'd known him, he looked afraid. "I'll consider your offer," she said finally. That evening, she called a family meeting. "I'm going to Phoenix," she announced, "but not alone. We're all going, the whole family together." The journey to Phoenix took 3 days by train, with Cielo traveling in a specially equipped car. The Women's Association had kept their promise, and the Esperanza family traveled in comfort none of them had ever experienced. Phoenix was a revelation, a real city with electric lights, paved streets, and more people than Maria had ever seen in one place. The Territorial Championship was being held at the new fairgrounds. 17 riders, Maria observed, studying the competition roster, from every corner of the territory. The morning of the competition, Maria woke to find a crowd gathered outside her hotel. Word of her story had spread through the Phoenix newspapers, and she had become something of a celebrity. The Phoenix fairgrounds were packed with over 2,000 spectators. As Maria walked Cielo around the arena, warming up for her run, She could feel the weight of all those eyes. She was scheduled to go 13th out of 17 riders. The early riders set a competitive pace, several sub-18-second runs that would have won handily in Desert Wells. When her turn came, Maria felt the familiar calm descend over her. The crowd noise faded, the pressure disappeared, and there was only herself, Cielo, and the course ahead. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer called, "representing Desert Wells, Miss Maria Esperanza." The applause was mixed but substantial, and Maria felt a surge of determination as she approached the starting line. She looked ahead at the 3 barrels that stood between her and vindication, then down at Cielo's ears, perfectly positioned and ready. "Now, girl," she whispered, and they flew forward into history. The run was flawless. 3 perfect turns executed with precision that drew gasps from the crowd. When they crossed the finish line and the time was announced, 17.73 seconds, a new territorial record. The cheers were so loud they could be heard 6 blocks away. As Maria rode her victory lap, the silver trophy gleaming in her hands, she looked up at the crowd and saw faces of every color and background united in appreciation for what they had just witnessed. But more than the trophy or the prize money, what mattered most were the young girls pressing against the arena fence, their eyes shining with the knowledge that they too could dare to dream impossible dreams. Maria Esperanza had ridden into Phoenix as a symbol. She rode out as something more powerful, proof that in America, merit could triumph over prejudice, and that courage could open doors that had seemed permanently locked. New fairgrounds, a sprawling complex that made the little arena in Desert Wells look like a child's playground. 17 riders, Maria observed, studying the competition roster in her hotel room. From every corner of the territory, some of these times, "Don't look at the times," Diego advised. "Times on paper don't win races, heart wins races." The morning of the competition, Maria woke to find a crowd gathered outside her hotel. Word of her story had spread through the Phoenix newspapers, and she had become something of a celebrity. Some in the crowd were supportive, holding signs that read, "Go Maria," and "Ride for Arizona." Others were clearly hostile, their faces twisted with the same hatred she'd seen in Desert Wells. "Just get to your horse," Diego murmured as they pushed through the crowd. "Once you're on Cielo, none of this matters." The Phoenix fairgrounds were packed with over 2,000 spectators, more people than lived in Desert Wells and the surrounding ranches combined. As Maria walked Cielo around the arena, warming up for her run, she could feel the weight of all those eyes, all those expectations. She was scheduled to go 13th out of 17 riders, a position that meant she'd know exactly what time she needed to beat. The early riders set a competitive pace, several sub-18-second runs that would have won handily in Desert Wells. When her turn came, Maria felt the familiar calm descend over her. The crowd noise faded, the pressure disappeared, and there was only herself, Cielo, and the course ahead. This was where she belonged, where all the noise and politics fell away, and only skill mattered. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer called, "representing Desert Wells, Miss Maria Esperanza." The applause was mixed but substantial, and Maria felt a surge of determination as she approached the starting line. This was bigger than winning a local competition. This was about proving that excellence could come from anywhere, that the barriers people built in their minds were just illusions waiting to be shattered. She looked ahead at the 3 barrels that stood between her and vindication, then down at Cielo's ears, perfectly positioned and ready. In the space of a heartbeat, all doubt disappeared. "Now, girl," she whispered, and they flew forward into history. The run was flawless, 3 perfect turns executed with precision that drew gasps from the crowd. When they crossed the finish line and the time was announced, 17.73 seconds, a new territorial record, the cheers were so loud they could be heard 6 blocks away. As Maria rode her victory lap, the silver trophy gleaming in her hands, she looked up at the crowd and saw faces of every color and background, united in appreciation for what they had just witnessed. For a moment at least, skill and courage had transcended every artificial barrier that divided people. But more than the trophy or the prize money, what mattered most were the young girls pressing against the arena fence, their eyes shining with the knowledge that they too could dare to dream impossible dreams. Maria Esperanza had ridden into Phoenix as a symbol. she wrote out as something more powerful, proof that in America, at least sometimes, merit could triumph over prejudice, and that courage could open doors that had seemed permanently locked. The fight was far from over, but on that dusty Arizona afternoon, justice had worn boots and spurs, and it had ridden like the wind.